Oh, welcome back to This, That, and the Other. Today, June the 25th, 1876, Native American forces led by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull defeat the U.S. Army troops of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer in the Battle of the Little Bighorn near southern Montana's Little Bighorn River. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, Lakota Sioux leaders, strongly resisted the mid-19th century efforts of the U.S. government to confine their people to reservations. In 1875, after gold was discovered in South Dakota Black Hills, the U.S. Army ignored previous treaty agreements and invaded one region. This betrayal led many Sioux and Cheyenne tribesmen to leave their reservations and join Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse in Montana. By the late spring 1876, more than 10,000 Native Americans had gathered in a camp along the Little Bighorn River, which they called the Greasy Grass, in defiance of a U.S. War Department order to return to their reservations or risk being attacked. In mid-June, 3 columns of U.S. soldiers lined up against the camp and prepared to march. A force of 1,200 Native Americans turned back the first column on June the 17th. 5 days later, General Alfred Terry ordered Custer's 7th Cavalry to scout ahead for enemy troops. On the morning of June the 25th, Custer drew near the camp and decided to press on ahead rather than wait for reinforcements. At midday, Custer's 600 men entered the Little Bighorn Valley. Among the Native Americans, word quickly spread of the impending attack. The older Sitting Bull rallied the warriors and saw to the safety of the women and children, while Crazy Horse set off with a large force to meet the attackers head-on. Despite Custer's desperate attempts to regroup his men, they were quickly overwhelmed. Custer and some 200 men in his battalion were attacked by as many as 3,000 Native Americans. Within an hour, Custer and every last one of his soldiers were dead. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, also called Custer's Last Stand, marked the most decisive Native American victory and the worst U.S. Army defeat in the Long Plains Indian War. The gruesome fate of Custer and his men outraged many white Americans and confirmed their image of the Native Americans as wild. Meanwhile, the U.S. government increased its efforts to subdue the tribes, and within 5 years, almost all of the Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne would be confined to reservations. And also on this day in U.S. history, or in world history, in 1978, first Rainbow Pride flag premieres at San Francisco Parade. In 1996, Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia kills 19 U.S. airmen. In 1864, Union begins tunneling towards rebels at Petersburg. In the 1950, U.S. World Cup team wins unlikely victory over England. In 1988, teenager Debbie Gibson earns a #1 hit with Foolish Beat. In 1993, Kim Campbell becomes Canada's first female prime minister. In 1942, Eisenhower takes command. In 1965, Viet Cong blow up a floating restaurant. In 1942, Eisenhower assumes command of U.S. troops in Europe. 2009, the king of pop, Michael Jackson, dies at age 50. In 1910, Congress passes Mann Act aimed at curbing sex trafficking. In 1950, the Korean War begins. In 1956, Glass Packard the classic American luxury car was produced. And in 1915, the Germans released statement on use of poison gas at Ypres. That has been this day in history. Hope you come back tomorrow for the next one. Hey, please hit that like, subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.